All right. Well, as we continue talking about the mission of God for the family, we are now talking about the wilderness. We've been talking about the three spheres of the world when God created Eden. He creates the land of Eden, the Garden of Eden within it, and then the wilderness outside of it. And we've talked about the home and the home life. We've talked about the a way the garden shapes people into who they are, tells them who they are. And then we've talked about the land sphere, the way that you go out to the land and you work the land and you bring the resources of the land back to the garden for it to be used by for the so the resources can be used to build up and transform the garden. Um, Now we're talking about the wilderness. God gave Adam and Eve the task of taking dominion through of the whole world, of gardening the whole world, of taking the whole world into its proper use. But the two of them, couldn't do it alone. The way that they had to do that was by multiplying. You multiply and take dominion, and that you raise up children into people that can go out and take dominion. So we talked yesterday about the fact that the first thing that they're going to need to become in order to get out into the wilderness is a dragon slayer. Right? If they're going to garden and guard the wilderness into a garden, they have to first be able to take it from the dragon. And and a big part of that is the dragon in their own hearts. They have to learn to tame and slay the dragon in their own hearts. And then they also need so that they don't become a dragon over the wilderness. And then they're going to find opposition out in the world, and they need to know what is the proper way in each situation to be opposed and to defeat your opposition. Where they're the dragons slayers, the way the book of Revelation, gives the a great picture of knights, and it really formed the imagination of the medievals about what kind of person a knight would be, or a gentleman would be, and a knight would be, in terms of being the safest person for women to be around and the most dangerous person for a dragon to be around. Right? And that dragon slayer mindset that says, I fight dragons so that women are safe. I fight dragons so that people weaker than me will be safe. That my strength is used to protect the weak, to protect the vulnerable, and make it possible for them to live their life. That mentality of the dragon slayer of the medievals was formed a lot around their study of the scriptures, and their study of David and the Psalms, and their study of the great heroes of the faith, as well as the study of the book of Revelation, and where you've got a dragon slayer with a sword. The way that they thought was all formed by that. Well, one of the other things that being a good dragon slayer makes possible is that you can go out and get the treasures of the wilderness and transform them into gifts for people. And that motif, that mentality, is centrally important in the way I understand it in what your children are doing, right? You're raising them up and so that they can go out and find the treasures that God has hidden in the world and transform them into gifts for humanity, gifts for their neighbor, gifts for their spouse, gifts for their children. And that has to do with calling in most people's lives, right? What is it that they are called to as they go out into the world? My wife and I started talking to our kids about calling. They went to classical Christian schools, and we talked to them about calling when they were students. Often, right now, your calling is to be a student. Right? When you have homework, and you're doing your homework faithfully, you are accomplishing your calling, and accomplishing your calling now is what prepares you to accomplish your calling later. I know right now homework doesn't seem exciting, going to school doesn't seem exciting, but if you can learn how to embrace and enjoy the what your calling is now, it'll give you a leg up to embrace and enjoy what your calling is in the future when it's something more to your choosing, more to your liking, sometimes not more to your liking. I've had to have, I've worked factory night shifts to make sure my kids have a, a roof over their head, and those were not jobs that I loved. But those that doesn't mean they're not your calling in the moment. Um, so all of the things involved in a calling, educating, leaving, uh, cleaving, cleaving to your spouse, and looking to uh, multiply to grow the church, looking to grow the population, in inventing, investing, and then leaving an inheritance. All of those aspects of treasure hunting are all wrapped around what your calling is, because your calling is never just simply a job, right? You have a calling in your church to use the gifts that God has given you. You have a calling in your home to take dominion, to multiply, to guard and garden one another, to grow people, to reflect the image of God there. And then you also have a calling out in the world, a calling out where you go and you get hold of some sort of resources and you transform them. So if you are a stay-at-home mom, then the calling is resource transformation, but it is the other side of what it is that your husband is doing when he goes out and gets the resources, right? It's there you're working on the same mission, on the in the same calling, as you work with the resources. So it's really important to wrap our heads around that this is what God is calling us to do. It's not something that you do just because you have to, right? When it's something that we do just because we have to, we grow in bitterness and we don't do our jobs as well. Whereas if you look at it and you say, oh, that God is the one that has put me in this situation, then what you find is that you can throw your whole heart into it, do it well, and that there's a deep joy to be found in callings that we often don't get to because we don't dig deep enough in our calling. Um, and one of my favorite passages on this is Colossians 3, whatsoever you do, do it heartily. Now, the word means with your whole heart. Do it heartily means with your whole heart. It means throw your whole self into it. So whatever and he's talking about your job, right? Whether you're master or servant, don't do things just to please men, just when somebody's looking, but with singleness of heart, with an undivided heart. Fear God and throw your whole heart into your calling, whatever God has called you to, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Right, that this is a King of Kings issue. Jesus is the ruler and authority over all things, including your workplace, right? Whatever it is that you're doing there. It says, but he that does wrong shall receive for the wrong what he has done. There is no respect of persons, right? It doesn't matter if you're wealthy or poor or middle class or whoever you are. God is the one who has put Christ over the world, and Christ is the authority to which you are serving. The authority you are serving, whether it's at a low position in the world or a high position in the world, in God's economy, when we're serving Christ, He's the one that rewards us. Now, this is in the section of Colossians that begins, whatsoever you do in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. When I was a brand new Christian, I got baptized at 16. It was a punk rock kid. And, I was 16 and a half or so. And a year and a half later, I turned 18 with all of my punk rock friends. And I was a new Christian, and they all thought I was a little strange, but we all were getting tattoos, and I got Colossians 3:17 tattooed on my back. um and it's before I had read Leviticus 19, where it says don't get tattoos. So there's a deep layer of irony in my tattoo, which is maybe why I ended up writing comedy. I don't know. But it says, whatsoever you do in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father. And then it starts going through the things God calls us to, the different places he puts us. He talks about being a spouse, being a wife, being a husband. He talks about being a child. He talks about being a parent. He talks about being a master. He talks about being a servant, right? Being a business owner, being an employee. And then he says, in all of these things, whether it's in your home. It's basically the entire economic sphere he describes. In all of these things, he says, do it with your whole heart unto the Lord, not trying to serve just whoever you whoever's looking at the moment, but serving Jesus with your calling. And this is something that uh, we'll talk about some more tomorrow in the details. But this is really important that we want to talk to our kids about this, and we want to especially uh, model this to them, right? Dads, when you come home and you're talking to your kids, if you're complaining about your boss, there's a real sense in which you're complaining through your boss at Jesus, who is the Lord of Lords, right? Who is the boss of bosses. And we want to show them what it looks like to embrace with thankfulness the job that God has given us in the moment. It doesn't mean that we can't seek upward mobility, look for ways to get to a job that we like more, right? That's totally legitimate and fair, but we don't do it, but we don't complain our way to the right situation because we serve the Lord Christ, and He's the one that rewards us for our faithfulness, and He gives us opportunities all day long to be faithful to Him in our calling. So the beginning of learning or the beginning of embracing our calling rightly is to embrace our calling as from the Lord and as to the Lord, right? We receive our calling from the Lord and then we work to the glory of Christ, doing all things in his name, whether in word or deed, doing it in his name, giving thanks to God the Father through him rather than complaining. So, all right, well, we'll talk more about treasure hunting tomorrow.